panel today, Michael Kroger, former Liberal Victorian President, and Jim Middleton from Council House. Gentlemen, thanks both for your time.
Tom.
Pretty
Good morning,
extraordinary warning today, I thought, first of all, Michael, from the Nats, Barnaby Joyce and this relatively small group. They're unhappy with the promotion approach. They're threatening to cross the floor. What do we expect here? That the people that tried to agitate for change then get jobs? Or are we just talking about Matt Canavan, for some reason, keeping his job?
Well, I think what they're looking for is for Matt Canavan to have been offered the hand of friendship and brought back into the cabinet because, you know, he's been an outstanding minister and a very good advocate for Queensland, I might add. So I think that's what they're complaining about. But quite frankly, Tom, is this acceptable behaviour? I mean, this is Mitt Romney-like. Seriously, Barnaby, earlier in the week, and I admire many things he did as National Party leader, but earlier in the week you say, I want to be vice-captain of the whole team. 3 days later you say, I'm taking my bat and ball with a couple of my friends and we might pull the whole joint down. I mean, Australians don't like that. It's not appropriate behaviour for politicians. We've all lost ballots in politics, all of us. It's part of the rough and tumble of the business, whether you like it or not. And if this story is true, and I've got no doubt, that no reason to question it because it hasn't been denied, to go to Scott Morrison and say, basically, because we didn't get our way, we'll put the whole show at risk, that's just unacceptable conduct. And, you know, and the other thing is, if Barnaby did want to be National Party leader, do you think this endears him to the National Party, the grassroots, the National Party, not getting that job and threatening to pull down the whole house? I mean, that's just very disappointing conduct from a former Deputy Prime Minister who, as I said, 4 days ago said, I'll be vice-captain of the whole team. Now he's saying I'll threaten the whole show.
Jim, what's the possibility here for Michael McCormack? Because clearly, if he did just say, oh, Matt Canavan, you're back, and I don't know, maybe give someone else an assistant ministry, the people that backed him would have said, well, hang on, why do we bother backing you? We get that you can't just all be about prizes. On the other side, Julia Gillard, of course, kept Anthony Albanese on after he wept about fighting Tories and supported Kevin Rudd. So what can we learn from history out of this?
I think that's a very perceptive comment you were making there, Tom, but I think the interesting thing is this shows exactly what Michael McCormack had to do to retain the leadership. The fact that we've got a situation, there are 6 people, all of whom are ministers, some of them promoted, well, most of them promoted and into new positions. You take Michael McCormack's vote as well, that's 7 of the 11 votes that he needed to retain the leadership. I don't think that on the evidence, the circumstantial evidence, I'd have to admit, that he had any choice about putting Matt Canavan back into the ministry, whatever his ability or qualities were, because he had to make all these agreements and conditions and terms with the people to support him to actually get here. Is that acceptable behaviour on the part of Barnaby Joyce, as Michael Kroger says? Probably not, but Barnaby Joyce has got a long record as far as this is concerned. He was a pain in the neck, if not a pain in the arse, as far as John Howard was concerned when he was a senator from Queensland, and quite clearly he's not about to change his behaviour now. As to the other 2 who are threatening to cross the floor, well, George Christensen's made a lot of threats in the past and they've come to nothing. As for Lou O'Brien, well, we will see. But the problem is it is something that means it's another calculation that Scott Morrison has to make in coming up with policy, that he has to watch his back at all times. He cannot be sure on any step that he takes that he won't have this ginger group causing at least irritation and trouble for him, if not crossing the floor.
It doesn't seem like much of a chance at the same time, Michael McCormack, that he'll be able to get the new leadership rules in, something along the lines of Liberal and Labor after their latest instability. Does that speak to the fact that Michael McCormack still struggles to get a strong majority, that part of his victory was because there's still a lot of antipathy towards Barnaby Joyce?
Well, I think that's probably right, but I don't think he's going to get that through. You know, it is what it is, Tom. All of us that have been in politics are going to have to deal with and work with people we don't like. You manage it the best you can. Sometimes you've just got recalcitrants that you cannot deal with. Whether they be, you know, at this stage what Barnaby's threatening to do. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull complained about the insurgents. You manage them the best way you can, and it's incredibly difficult. I can tell you from my own experiences, people just don't actually want to help. are in positions, and they're just trying to destabilise the ship. I mean, this is just unfortunately part of politics, and very few of us are as good as John Howard was. If you know, one of the many differences between the Howard leadership Mark I and Howard leadership Mark II was that under Howard leadership Mark II, he was able to get and hold in line into his cabinet people on the left of the party, the wets or the moderates as they're now called, bring them into cabinet and make them feel part of the team. And that was a core part of his success as Prime Minister the second time round. He coined the phrase, you know, broad church, and he stuck by that. And he did it more successfully than any other leader since him has done. It's a hard thing to do, but he did it incredibly well. And it's still a challenge for any political leader in this day and age.
I do wonder one other thing too, Michael and Tom, which is this, that in 96 and in 2004, John Howard could have governed without the National Party. But he was very clear after the 1996 election that he would deal the National Party in. Also, he managed to use his authority in a very, very sensible way. He knew when to impose his authority, as he did, for example, over guns, but on other occasions he also knew when to give something to the Nationals so that they would feel that they were within the tent, that they were being respected. I don't think that a Liberal leader since then has actually understood or exercised that dynamic.
Well, it's an interesting balance coming up now for Michael McCormack as to how he sort of maps out his approach to these renegades, if we call them. Their first shot was fired in the party room over coal and now continues with this morning the PM, so one to keep a close eye on. Michael, I wanted to ask you about, after we've had this week the revelations of the AEC, the disclosure of political donations, so $420 million has been revealed. About $1 billion we don't really know because of the nature of our laws in this area. Is that a problem? We know 420 and where that comes from, 420 mil, but $1 billion is a big question mark?
When you put it that way, of course it sounds like a problem, but when you explain that by saying that that's because overwhelmingly that part of the donation pool was for donations under the threshold, meaning under 13,200 or 500, whatever it is today, it's like, oh, okay. So these are all smaller donations from people making up a huge pot of money. So when you look at it that way, is it a problem? No, it's not really a problem. As I've
the
said,
threshold itself, though, 14,000. I mean, you call that small. A lot of people would say it's pretty big, and you can donate 13,999 again and again and again, and that's the whole point, isn't it?
No.
If it's someone like that,
you can't do it. If it's cumulative, then you're over the 14,000. I mean, people have tried that over the years. That's illegal. So you're not allowed. You're not permitted to do that. But Tom, all of this again re-raises the question which people like Stephen Conroy and I have been on about for ages, which is there ought to be 100% public funding in Australia, so you have complete transparency, complete, total and absolute transparency of how political parties and elections are funded. Once you do that, you take away any argument that there's anything underhanded about how the political process operates in this country. Now, political parties are already funded very significantly through government funding on the per vote basis. But Tom, you just imagine if we had complete funding, it would take away all this disclosure, all these arguments. No company wants to give money. No one actually wants to give money to political parties. No union wants to give money to the Labor Party. I mean, you know, everyone's sick of having their name in the paper. They're sick of going to functions and going to functions for both parties in the case of many. No, you need 100% public funding. That gives you, in this Western democracy, world cutting-edge, leading compliance regime, which is totally transparent, and therefore there can be no argument about any problems in relation to donations or disclosure. That's what should happen.
I tell you what, I'll vote for that change. Jim Middleton, can we make it free?
Oh, absolutely. Look, Michael Kroger is dead right. We need to get money out of politics in Australia. The disclosure regime that we have, particularly federally, is full of holes, riddled with problems. There ought to be continuous disclosure at the very least, but the goal ought to be public funding. The problem, I would say, as far as what Michael is and Stephen Conroy and others is proposing, is I'm not sure whether the public at the moment, given their general disdain for politicians and the low esteem within which they are held, what would be the situation if you were to present a regime, Michael, where there was full public funding.
Who'd run the campaign against it, I guess, Jim? What would be the worries about who'd run a big campaign against public funding?
Well, look, I tell you what, as we've seen, wherever you do something like this, you will find someone coming out of the woodwork who will oppose it. And that is
maybe Clive Palmer could tip in another 80 mil.
Well, that'd be a great idea too, wouldn't it? That's another real problem as far as the politics of Australia is concerned. Do we want to go down the US route where we have billions and billions of dollars involved in electoral politics? The Clive Palmer situation, that should never, ever be allowed to happen again. And it may be that this assisted the Liberal Party this time round, but I'm sure Michael knows that what goes around comes around. It could turn around and go the other way.
Exactly.
Something has to be done at the very least to make sure that a private individual cannot have that much money in advertising and so on and so forth, which can benefit one or other party that's involved in the election.
Well, it all sounds pretty sensible to me, gentlemen. We'll tell you what, we'll talk about how we can best get that to happen. Michael, you might be able to convince the Liberal Party, because I suspect they might be an issue, and look, we'll see what happens. But Michael Kroger,
terrific.
Jim Middleton, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Pleasure.